So, what are some of the pressing topics that you have gotten asked several times in the build up to this call over the years? Young kids like me coming and asking you that you would have dished out advice on.
You are not so young. You are almost there.
Being extremely generous, saying some, I would say most.
And her skip was Bill Gates' office.
It's an inverted way of looking at it. It's not that US has good work-life balance. It's India has bad work-life balance.
If an iPhone costs $800, $900 and you get $10,000 as your salary a month, you're literally not spending a lot to buy an iPhone. But that's not the same case how you would see it in India.
Trades of exploitation to buy convenience.
Yeah, that I agree with. It's a bad thing.
You can buy products cheaply here, but you can't buy services that cheaply here.
Hello everyone, welcome to the first episode of OK Boomer. I have Body Shankar and Alien Ashwin with me. A while back we discussed that let's take some of our WhatsApp conversations into video format. That will be useful to more than just us, and that's what we are gonna try and do. This is gonna be super informal, but hopefully also useful. Folks, what are we discussing today? So, what are some of the pressing topics that you have gotten asked several times in the build up to this call over the years? Like young kids like me coming and asking you that you would have dished out advice on.
I generally get a lot of pressure that I've hired come to me and ask whether, is it worth studying an MBA or is it worth studying higher studies after a few years or all of that. And there are a lot of people who are also contemplating doing that in India versus outside India. And that's a larger topic, like migrating out of India or staying in India. So I think we can talk about those two topics today.
Super. We also have a diverse group, Body being a master's degree holder and Alien Ashwin being the person, the alien. He's the one coming from outside India also to give his takes. Maybe we'll start off with Ashwin then. Ashwin, educate us. Why did you move out of India? Would you recommend? But please remember that every Indian who sets foot in the US is technically competition for you. But based on what you have seen.
Yeah. Yeah. No, one thing I want to note is that you called yourself a young kid in the beginning of this conversation. I don't know if you did that consciously. You are not so young. You are almost there, as close as how old we are. But yeah, I'm living in Seattle right now. It's been, I think, 2 years, almost 2 years. See, reasons and everything is multifold, right? There is no right or wrong. It's all about what every individual thinks, sees, aims for, and the opportunities that you get. I was just lucky that there was an opportunity that came up. But in hindsight, when you look at it, life is very different and the same. You would say when you move here, the exposure to tech companies around you is a lot. There are a lot of where I live. It's the headquarters of Microsoft and Seattle. It's like how do you call it? When you go to a city, like everyone assumes you are in Microsoft. When they see someone who with the specs, and when you're nerdy enough, when you go to a coffee shop, the first question they will ask you is, "Do you work in Microsoft?" They won't ask you where are you working. Right? That's how this city is. And if you are a Microsoft or an Amazon employee, you get priority boarding in airports. You don't have to wait in queue in a lot of places. So the city is known for that, right? So stemming from it, you have a lot of early employees of Microsoft who had started other companies, and those companies are also based in the neighborhood. This is just Seattle example, right? Of course, Bay Area is the same. When you have Cisco, Palo Alto Networks, all of them who started in 80s and 90s, they're just, I would say, 2 decades ahead of how the tech circle in India is. So your circle and exposure might be different.
Ashwin, do you think that's still true in big old 2024? I feel like with the proliferation of internet, there is not really much of a difference in terms of a head start that Silicon Valley used to have now.
I would say more than head start, it's the lifetime and brand recognition, right? So, like over the last couple of years, it is not one or two companies that have made it big like Microsoft or Amazon. It is 100 small companies. So, unless one of those companies grows, see, after a Microsoft or a Yahoo or a Amazon, like the next couple of big companies are your Facebook, Meta, and like Netflix, and maybe a few more, right? The number of companies that have reached that level of exposure and general, like being a household name, obviously it's a lot compared to what it was 10 years, 20 years ago. But I think it is too fragmented to say that, it doesn't have that value. Like it has that value because there are companies which are brand names, and not every company is a brand name.
I think some fundamental research in technology also happens in the US, right? Compared to, let's say, India, right? So I think that also plays a
You're
part.
being,
Huh?
you're being extremely generous saying some. I would say most.
I was just like, yeah, that's true, right?
You're
So,
ex-
and that's been happening for decades, and there's like a lot of people who've migrated over the years. So that's like a
Yep.
distinct advantage, I guess. Uh, I think you rub shoulders with people or generations of people who worked in technology, right, or shaping technology. So I think that's what Ashwin is hinting at.
Yeah. So to give you an example, right? My wife's manager, current manager, the company she works in. So she used to work in Microsoft in the 90s, early, like late 80s and 90s. And her skip was Bill Gates' office, right? So the exposure that they would have gotten in that early years from 90s to 95s in a company like Microsoft that grew, uh, so that opportunity might come in India. Like, of course, India is catching up for sure. Tech in the other part of the world is also catching up. Like, no debate about it. But US has already seen it, right? And there is generations of people who have lived here for decades and have seen that. That part of it is there, and that's with maybe professional work, right? But when you also look at other things like say culture of work and how do you see work, how do you balance your work with personal uh, like goals that you have and hobbies you have. I also feel it's little more like balance is what you make out of your work, right? I'm not saying in India you won't find that balance, but i I feel there is some stigma around, hey, you have to work hard and put in long hours for you to be seen as a hardworking person, right? That is just absolutely not true here. But you still have to work hard. But I can, I like it would be more easier to say I'm going for a haircut at 10 a.m. Right? You give that respect to time for when you want it. That is, that also I feel like in a company where I worked, I've never had that, but I've had a lot of friends who say it's just way like you have to spend more time to be seen as a hardworking person in other companies. I don't know how Shankar and Body can relate to that.
And yeah, I think I
Yeah,
spend a lot of time working, so I don't mind. But uh, to
I,
your original
I think it.
question, yeah, sorry, Body.
Good, good, good.
To your original question, Chris Bot, like 1 year ago, I was also thinking about moving, 1 or 1.5 years ago. And I think what it came down to was I looked at what I had at Freshworks versus other places I worked at. And I really thought about what I wanted, right? So for me, what I realized was at Freshworks, I had a lot of freedom. So I could pick some projects that I wanted and learn on the go, and I could say no to the things I didn't want to do, right? But I still went out of my comfort zone a bit here and there and learned a lot of things. I felt like that was possible because I worked with people who understood me and who understood what I brought to the table, trusted me, and gave me the opportunity to like expand sideways or around my core strengths, right? So that's what I really liked. And I realized that freedom precedes learning. So I felt like I wanted to work with people who knew me, who understood me, and who would like help me stretch my skills and abilities than with people than where I'm another employee who's joining like a European company, right? So I think it was about trade-offs for me. I think moving to Europe or the US would have been like I would have had more work-life balance. I would have worked on something interesting, but I didn't want to miss the fast pace of work here, the rate at which I would learn things. And I also didn't want to miss the opportunity to work with people who are both smart and who understand what I bring to the table and trust me to like give opportunities, right? So I think I looked at it like when I had to make a decision to stay here or leave, uh, I looked at it that way. It was a decision of trade-offs like any other decision. And for me, staying in India made more sense purely based on like rate of learning, working with smart people I know who understand my skills.
Body, for
Yeah,
you, moving out was never an option, no? So we have
but
Alien
never a
who
choice, not never an
Hmm.
option. Like,
Fair
it
enough.
was an option at some point where I was considering. I'll tell you those stories. But so for me, I mean, one point I'd like to add, like based on what Ashwin and Shankar both said in terms of work-life balance and all that, I think that is a very, I mean, it's an inverted way of looking at it. It's not that US has good work-life balance. It's India has bad work-life balance. So I wouldn't like we are calibrated to think that what is in India is the norm. So that looks better. It's not really better. That is the baseline. That is good. We are probably in the negative side. And I think it is not to do with India as a country. It is to do with Indians as a mentality. So like I've heard of stories of bad managers, bad culture, bad work-life balance in US for people reporting to Indian origin bosses. Like when I say Indian origin, not American, but Indian heritage and Indian roots, but Indians who migrated and became managers in the US. So that is not really uh, a factor of India locationally. Like it's not a location factor. It is the scarcity mindset because we are a country of so many billion people and everyone wants to prove that they're better or they deserve it and they end it, all of that. So uh, I think it's a byproduct of that.
I think as a culture, we think more time means and showing up more time and showing to others that we are working is like it's a part of the culture, right? So I guess
That is a
that's
byproduct of
yeah, that's
being
good.
competitive. Like you're
Competition,
competing
yeah.
against 100 people for the same thing, so you want to show that you're doing more, you're doing better. I mean, better is subjective, more is quantitative, so it's easier to show more than to show better. Like that's the easy way out.
That's true.
Yeah.
But moving on from work-life balance, what are the other real advantages that you have seen, Ashwin, between
Yeah. So one more big aspect that I think everybody should also consider is the financial aspect of it, right? Uh, yes, there are good paying jobs in India also. Of course, there is purchase power parity involved. But for, say, a regular person who's moving here for 100K job, you can afford a lot more things than the equivalent pay that you would get in India, right? And like you always see an example of an iPhone where percentage of your pay, that's how you kind of calculate, right? If an iPhone costs $800, $900 and you get $10,000 as your salary a month, you're literally not spending a lot to buy an iPhone. But that's not the same case of how you would see it in India. Like there are and a lot of people I know have explicitly told me that after they moved to the US, they become more financially independent. Otherwise, like if they had stayed back home, it might have taken them more time settling off all the loans or buying a house, like all of that. So financial aspect is one big thing. Like I don't know how Body and Shankar would react, but yeah, if you're already in a high paying job in India, it's a different equation. But that's not the case with say 95, 98% of the people. Right?
Yeah,
I
I
love
think
how
salary.
he singled out Shankar and Body when he said high page.
No, I think for people who are top of the line, salaries are also like pretty good in India after the I don't know VC
Hmm.
funding boom in the last 3 4 years. So that's a big change. I also feel like in the US you can like buy things, but in India you can also like use your money to save time. Like you can have a cook,
House
etc.
help. Yeah.
Yeah, but the bad
India,
thing about it, people are paid low wages, right? So that's the bad thing.
India
But yeah,
trades off exploitation to buy convenience.
yeah, that I agree with. It's a bad thing, but I'm saying it's a trade-off. Yeah,
You can buy products cheaply here, but you can't buy services that cheaply here. So
Mm.
correct.
services are expensive. So
Yeah,
I actually have driller in my house. Like most of the basic electrical and drilling things, I do it myself because calling someone is just expensive. Like
Mm.
the
I
item will cost
recently
me
read
$4, but just calling someone to drill will cost me $25. So I don't, I don't
I
want to do that.
recently read one comment on Reddit, like same topic debate. I think somebody had asked, like on the comment that put, like you have to look internally versus externally. Like in India, everything inside your house is in your control, but everything outside your house, like air pollution, road traffic, blah blah blah, all of that you have no control over. But if you need anything to be repaired, you need food at your doorstep. All of that can be done like with minimal time and effort. In the US, is the opposite. Everything outside, you have good roads, good infrastructure, good air, all of that. But if you want something done in your house, you have to pay out of, like you have to pay a lot, or you have to do everything yourself.
So I did think about good air and water when I had to make this decision. I
Yeah,
also
you
felt,
think about that a lot more than the average human.
yeah, I
I
do,
think
but
no, no, no. I think Shankar has just disqualified all countries equally. Everyone is going to die because of global warming,
but
so it
then,
doesn't matter
but
if
then
I'm
when
there
you
or
look
here.
at it, if you're eating out in the US, is way more worse than like eating out in India or like. Yeah. So I think there are pros and cons. It's about what you really want versus what you're
No,
willing to put.
mm, okay, how I think about this, considering that you're all probably over the hill in a way, and I'm still contemplating the choice. I feel if somebody is blessed with good communication, come from a place of decent privilege, um, it's almost like not taking full advantage of that, right? When you go to the US, you can actually survive. So if you take my case, coming from Sastra, BCom, yes, by the way, we have a BCom at Sastra. Most of my classmates are probably right off the bat disqualified to go abroad, right? As a knowledge worker, at least, simply because they may not be comfortable with the communication, they wouldn't have had the exposure. But anybody who can do that will have a significantly better life abroad than here. Would you say that's a reasonable claim?
Yeah, but what if you really like SaaS and you think the best SaaS is or the best opportunities for SaaS is in India? So I do think
Shankar
there's like
is
so
Shankar is
much.
talking like an NRA VC.
No, but like statement makes sense for a lot of people. But what if the thing for that you really like is actually like a happening thing in India? Right? Then India is the best place to be. So, but yeah.
I mean,
See, one
India.
more big aspect that you should think of is your family circle, right? Your social and family situation that you're in. Uh, moving to, say, Singapore or Dubai is just 3 or 4 hours flight. Like anything that your family needs, you can just be there the same evening or the next morning. But US is not the same. When you're moving all the way to the US, it takes 2 days for you to reach your family, even if there's an emergency. So you have to be considerate of what situation your family is in and your social circle. That's going to be very different here. You will not have so many people to hang out, or it takes time to form that circle. So you have to be a little conscious of that. If you're a very people's person, someone like Body, I think he'll find it hard the first few years, at least when he moves to US.
Mm,
What
Very,
about
very interesting that you chose Singapore and Dubai, because there is one other aspect, like for me, not the people, it is the weather. So, like if in on the
I
world,
thought
there
he
are
was gonna
probably
say
only
tax.
few countries where it is not cold, it is bearable cold for me. I think Singapore and Dubai are both equally warm. I mean, they're on the warmer side. I know they are also cold, they have cold days, but the warmer side of it is pleasant. Like, I don't think I can survive in like East Coast in US and all of that. Like, I will freeze, I'll get frostbite and die.
Ashwin? What about getting like a doctor's appointment and things like that? Is that difficult for people or? Yeah, I've heard stories where people had to wait like 2 days to like 5, 6 days or more.
Days are
It's
weeks,
debate.
like,
Yeah, it's see, it's debatable. I would say if you have a good insurance, if you are living in a good city, you would still be able to manage. It's not as bad as how you would hear about it, but ultimately it depends on where you are as well, right? The closer the problem. If you're living in a bigger city, I don't think you would have that big of a problem. The first appointment is what matters. Like that is difficult. When you move, getting a good doctor as your primary doctor will be difficult. So you would have to wait for like 3, 4 months to get that first appointment. but follow-ups are usually available.
Hmm.
And like it also depends on doctors' rating, right? When you want the best of the best of the doctors, of course you have to wait. But like there are other clinics if you're okay in just getting a blood test, blood work done. Uh, so I've gone like the same evening I've gotten appointments and gone. So but that's just a regular clinic in the roadside. So
Got it.
One of the other points of contention we might probably have to touch on that's very real is the discrimination, right? It's uncomfortable to talk about possibly, but do you think it's as prevalent as it's portrayed in mainstream cinema or sitcoms, or would that be a factor when you actually take into account whether you have to be here or move? I think again
I don't
that's
think
directed
so.
at Ash.
Yeah, no, no, it's a very sensitive topic, but I've had zero uh, experience of any discrimination of any sort anywhere in the country.
I would say it is prevalent. You may be able to avoid it if you live in a bubble, or if you are not exposed to it. But it's impossible to say it doesn't exist, or it is not something to worry about, because I think some of, like, at least the students, like the people who work for like a year or two and then gone for masters and all of that, they may not have budget to live in safe areas, so they end up rooming together in like unsafe areas, and their biggest fear is getting mugged or getting shot on the road. Like that is a valid fear. And I think I recently caught up with two of my juniors. One is living in New York, one is living in Dublin. So they basically exchanged notes that the only difference is, like, the weapon may be a gun in the US, the weapon will be a knife in Ireland. That's all. Like, the problem is still the same.
Yeah, I think the tech bubble is one of the biggest factors. I think that is what is actually driving the discussion also. Like the same
See, a
discussion,
lot
if
of your, I think,
more people.
safety and healthcare, everything is dependent on the city you move. So city you pick. That
I
has
think
a
India
big
also
influence.
gets bad rep because of our population and our, I would say, like, we end up migrating to countries and then making it the majority. Like, Indians become the majority in the country, then that becomes a
Atithi Devo Bhava.
yes.